In this video, I'm going to be talking about what does disability even look like. So stay tuned because that's coming all right up. Hey guys, it's Effie. Welcome back to my channel where I discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of living with a chronic illness and other lifestyle topics. If that sounds cool to you, make sure to hit subscribe and the bell button to be notified every single time I post a new video, or else it will get lost in this whole YouTube space that we're in. So for Invisible Disabilities Week, I wanted to create a little mini part 3 series again on my channel with just me talking about disabilities of all kinds, especially invisible disabilities. And if you haven't checked out part 1 and 2 of this series, I highly suggest you do so. In part 1, I discussed how to spot a fake disabled accessible parking placard. Whichever name you want to choose to call it is fine. There's several others, and I discussed that in part 1. In part 2, I share how to know if someone is faking a disability. And in part 3, I'm going to be sharing what does disability even look like. And I know this may seem like a weird question to ask, but it is a legit one, and that's why we're going to talk about it today, because it is Invisible Disabilities Week, like I had mentioned, and this is an important topic to raise awareness on because there's so much misunderstanding around disabilities in the first place. And my answer to this is that disabilities can look like anything, anyone. It doesn't discriminate. While a lot of people with disabilities are discriminated against, disability itself doesn't discriminate in who it chooses to make quote-unquote disabled. And I know a lot of people don't like to refer to that phrase in regards to identifying themselves. There are a lot of people out there who proudly say that they are disabled and this is part of their identity and this is who they are. That's great that they do that, and I applaud them. There's other people out there who may not feel comfortable labeling themselves as a disabled person, even if they live with a disability, and they just identify themselves as really nothing, or maybe someone who just lives with a chronic condition, or who had an accident and they live with a disability. And I applaud those people too. There's no wrong or right way when it comes to identifying. It's all personal preference. I know for me personally, I fall into all these different categories. I'm someone who lives with an invisible illness. I'm someone who lives with an invisible disability. I'm also someone who lives with chronic pain, has a chronic condition, and also someone who lives with a visible disability. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But when it comes to what disability even looks like, you know, that is something that is not necessarily that easy to explain or even see. Because as I discussed in part 1 and 2 of my videos, there are so many different categories of disabilities. For instance, your neighbor who is in her 70s, who runs every morning, can be living with a disability. Your student, if you're a teacher, who is dealing with a form of autism, has a disability. There can be another elderly person in a wheelchair or uses a cane, or a younger person who may be using an accessible aid like a cane or any other device that helps them navigate through life easier, and they may be in their 20s or 30s and they are disabled as well. So as you see here, disabilities can look like anyone or anything. Even pets can become disabled or be dealing with an invisible disability, whether it be a horse whose knees are hurting them, or your dog who is running around playing with other dogs, but when they go home are in pain because they are dealing with something. So no matter what color your skin is, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your socioeconomic background, that doesn't matter when it comes to invisible disabilities or visible disabilities. Because anyone can be impacted by it at any time. We don't know what tomorrow brings. We don't know what the next second, day, week, month brings, really. You can be quote-unquote healthy one moment and then find yourself in a situation where you are living with an invisible illness that progresses over time, where you are suddenly thrown into the invisible disability category, and then you are thrown into the visible disability category, and you sort of morph into all these areas, not really knowing where you fit in. And that's kind of what I feel as an individual who has been living with a chronic illness for 15 years, because at first I was someone who lived with an invisible illness. And while I was living with an invisible illness, I did have some damage in my wrist and my elbow and parts of my hands, but no one was able to see that in those beginning years because it was more internal. But at the same time, I was living with a disability too, because when you lose any motion in your upper extremities, I just want to put a side note here that it is extremely disabling. And we use these parts of our bodies for the simplest of tasks daily. And we don't think twice about them until something happens and we need to be mindful of our every move. So to onlookers at that time in my life, I looked perfectly healthy and fine, but I wasn't. But then as my disease progressed eventually over the years, because with rheumatoid arthritis that can happen, I had a knee replacement, I had a little bit more damage in my hands and my elbow that became visible. However, if I wore gloves or a coat or pants that covered my knee scar from my surgery, people wouldn't be able to tell that I was living with the disability. When people ask you, if they ever do, what does disability even look like, do you know what to say? Because there's not one way to answer this. It can look like anyone. I mean, I'm someone here talking to you right now where I can say that, well, okay, here I am. I'm a person that is living with a disability, so you can use me as an example. But like I had said, if you don't know anything about me and I'm out there one day at a winter festivity and I'm wearing gloves and a hat and a coat and all these other things that cover my whole body, you would never know that I was living with a disability. You would think that nothing is wrong, like I had said. And then, so that's when people go into the visible disability aspect, when you are able to tell if something's going on with someone. So let's say you see someone in a wheelchair or they're using a cane. Do you necessarily know what type of disability they have? No, you don't. You can assume that they are going through something because they're using an accessible aid, but you have to keep in mind that people who use wheelchairs, canes, or anything else of the sort may not even be living with an invisible illness or an invisible disability. They may have had an accident. They may have had surgery. And so theirs is more temporary, where there's other people who are dealing with more of a permanent disability. And I discussed, the difference between this blue badge or permanent disabled parking placard in regards to the red one, which is more for people who are dealing with a temporary disability. So as you see here, there's so many different variations of what a disability is. So to even answer what does a disability even look like becomes even more hard once you are sort of in this world that I live in. There's many people who come across this video who don't even know anything that I'm talking about. To be honest, before I got diagnosed, I didn't really know much about all the disability stuff. I just assumed that there was one placard. I didn't know that there was another one that was red that was for temporary disability. I also sometimes looked at someone parking in an accessible parking spot and wondered if they were really disabled. And that's some thoughts that we all have had at one point or another when we were younger or older. It doesn't really matter. But as you come into experience things over time, you learn that there's people struggling with different things. That's just like asking, what does a rich person look like? I mean, there's so many rich people walking around this planet who are very humble. They still drive a quote-unquote regular car. There's nothing fancy to it. They wear non-designer clothes. And so you won't be able to tell if they are rich or not. But then there's other people out there who flaunt more expensive things, and you may think or assume that they are rich, but they are actually dead broke. And they are just using things like purses and clothes that are not authentically the real brand, but they are knockoff items, or they got it on sale. And so that's pretty much all I have for this video, and I hope that was informative and educational in some way in regards to all three of these videos. As you see, there was sort of a sequence and how I tied these all together, because with it being Invisible Disabilities Week, there is so much to discuss about it, and I hope that I've done my part in helping you learn something new. And maybe if you feel that these videos resonate with you in any way, feel free to share them. And before we go, I want to announce the second Spoonie Star Supporter of the Week. Here they are. Yes, that's right. I'm announcing 2 people this week because on Thursday I launched part 2 of the video and today is part 3. Thank you so much for showing me love on my Instagram. And as always, if you want to be featured on my next video, all you need to do is stay active on my Instagram, Rising Above RA, and YouTube channel, RA and Myself. I pick someone at random each time. I will do a better job of picking people from YouTube, so if you are staying active on my YouTube channel, continue to do so, because I'm going to pick more people in the upcoming videos that I post. Until next time, guys, bye! Cheers!